Hello, everybody. Welcome to Redesign Your Discovery meeting for high impact. Hopefully everyone's come to the right session. I see we've got 27, 28, 30. All right, we're getting a good crowd together. If you don't mind, I'd love to find out in the audience we have here what roles people have, so I can talk about sort of the impact of this if you're a leader, if you're a manager, if you're in marketing, if you're an IC. So it would be great to hear in the chat kind of how different people are focusing on this issue. We have 20 minutes. We may be able to go a little over and do Q&A. I've got a lot of content, which if you've ever met anybody who comes from a background at CB and Gartner, we love our research, so I'll be sharing a lot, but trying to make this with some real detailed takeaways for practical application. And for folks in leadership, obviously there's a level of simplifying this as you think about how you might bring some of these ideas down to the teams and make them digestible, right? So we've set this at sort of a strategic and execution level, and look forward to diving right in. So I'm just checking out the chat. All right. Frontline managers, sales managers, enterprise sales director, partnerships. Okay, great. Thanks for the feedback. All right, here we go. Put your hands up if you need me to slow down. I'm going to go pretty fast. And hopefully some good takeaways here. All right, Insight Revenue, that's our business. We're all about the science of growth, right? And when we think about the science, we want to understand more about what's going on the customer side today so that we can actually take the right actions to help be more effective in getting our customers to the right outcomes, right? But at the end of the day, I think a lot of you are here because selling, it ain't easy, right? There were a few years where there's a lot of money flowing, a lot of just purchase decisions being made, a lot of folks buying things that were nice to have and not need to have. And boy, has it flipped on the other side for most industries. So at the end of the day, the fact that demand is down and deal scrutiny is up, you've got CFOs involved at some level in almost every purchase, and you've got this tremendous amount of noise that's affecting how people perceive you, as well as your products, your offerings, right? Your solution, your platform. And because of that, and because of the pivots most companies have been making in the last couple of years, think about consolidation, adding features and benefits, et cetera, your buyers, they're overwhelmed with options. And this leads to some really wonky behavior on their side that makes it even harder, not just to get meetings with them, but to get, obviously a great deal put together. And so when we think about running a great discovery meeting, you're thinking about this environment, what's going on the other side of the table. Now, the result of this is 75% of buyers, and this is recent Gartner research, actually say they don't even want to talk to you, your teams, you as a sales rep, your sales reps in the field, or your customer success managers, account managers. And that's a big problem, right? Because for all of us here who believe in the profession and improvement of the craft, we do not want to be replaced by AI, right? The right-hand side of this story is pretty darn exciting, which is, look, when the buyer doesn't have a salesperson actively involved throughout the process, 60% of the time they're actually disappointed in what they buy. 43% of the time they are significantly disappointed. And if you look at it, you almost have twice a chance of a high-quality deal if you have a rep involved and rep involved early. So at the end of the day, we want to figure out how to have those first sales interactions, those discovery meetings, more often earlier in the process so they can have more influence on a better quality deal. So there's a great outcome here if we get this right. We've been asking over the years a lot of different people, what actual influence did the salesperson have on your buying decision in the last purchase that you made? And I'm sorry, but unfortunately, this was the result. So why did I choose this session today? Because I think this is the most important starting point to be able to deliver more than nothing and deliver more value, and not just be there for product and price, right? Because again, if your sales team, all they're doing is actually there to talk about product and price, pretty quickly, there's no value added in that. And, your customer's going to want to buy off the website. And at the end of the day, or from your AI bot, and at the end of the day, you're going to have low quality business because you won't be able to actually influence very effectively in that model. Why is this happening? Because our sales interactions are broken. If you look at the strategy of what most companies are putting out to market, what they're telling their sales team to do versus what the actual buyer is looking for in that first interaction, they're dramatically different things, right? So you've got an agenda here of completely different sides of the coin. Your customer showing up, and it depends on this is inbound or outbound a lot of the times, but pretty much they want, hey, there's been a buying journey. You have not been involved with a lot of that. So now that they're marshaled to gather information on product, price, can maybe they get some favors, a free trial, a discount they couldn't get off the website. But they're also trying to evaluate, do we want to work with these people and can we trust them? We've been burned so many times before, and now our CFO's on our back. So how are we going to be sure that what we buy is actually going to work for us? On the other side of the coin, though, you're being sold, whether it's Bant, Medic, Spice, whatever the model is, a lot of times you're screening in that first call. Is this person ever really going to buy anything from us? Is this worth investing the time? And so I'm looking more for things like needs and requirements, budget, timelines, what's your process, who else is involved? Now, what's the value, right? What kind of relationship are we establishing if we just run trains towards these stations? Clearly, there's got to be a better way to actually set up both the customer and the salesperson for success. And so we go back really through 20 years of research. And so my team is built of a lot of folks who've worked along the way from CEB and Gartner and Challenger and other organizations to look at the best research on these topics. And really fundamentally, my co-founder, Timur, Yilmaz, actually did most of the studies behind all of these books that you saw and work from CEB and Gartner and Challenger. And obviously incorporating, there's a great book, Jolt Effect, and others that have led to great research and great strategies for implementation, right? And that's what we're trying to bring you and bring our customers on a daily basis is what is the best thinking to solve for the current state of buying. And so good news is, if you go back to look at the most important research done over the last 20 years, it's this study, probably I would say has been in more boardroom level conversations where it's looking at what causes a customer to buy from you, buy again, and advocate for on your behalf inside and outside of the organization. And the great news is, and why we're all here today, is that this study's been validated for many, many years. And it's even more important, we would say now, than probably when we started gathering this data. Why? Because the buying environment, there's so much scrutiny right now, and it's so hard to differentiate. You really need to be able to dial in to a very high bar for sales experience. And it's more than half of what drives that buying decision. And so this is essentially when you think of a great diagnosis meeting, a great for sales interaction, and a great essentially experience for the buyer, it all comes down to these key factors. And we're going to talk about how do you execute and bring some of these things to the table during your first sales interaction or discovery meeting. Number one, it all starts with insight and perspective and knowledge of the customer, not knowledge of your own products. Number two, how are you a trusted advisor? How are you being objective and helping them navigate alternatives and mistakes? And you are teaching them about new issues and outcomes that they didn't learn about before. So you're opening their mind to innovation. That's where you're going to have high quality business, is when they want to go to a place that not every single vendor in the market can take them. And then the last point, maybe less important in your diagnosis and discovery calls, but at the end of the day, they need your support to help them gather a number of people together to actually get anything done. And you're going to want to actually think about how your strategy for multi-threading is going to work in the first meeting, right? So we're going to talk about how you have a strategy for that. So this is essentially the key fundamentals. Let's talk about how you apply this to a great sales conversation, and in particular, that first sales interaction. And so building on that, we've actually looked at, this research has been done for really hundreds of years. They say going back to Aristotle, buyer psychology is actually that there is a stage of information and communication that actually leads to your ability to shape demand and lead to your differentiation and ultimately an alignment between yourself and your buyers, right? And so we're going to go into a great deal of detail, and then you're going to get a link so you can actually dive in and do some takeaways. But real quick, ultimately what you're trying to do is make a connection and build credibility at the beginning so that you can actually change the way that they think about an issue, and we call that the shift or the reframe. The third piece is actually how do you connect that to business value? And then stakeholder impact. There's a personal, emotional, and rational side of any business decision that you need to start connecting to very early on in your discovery process. Then you got to think about how do you lead them to appreciate the components of your business model that make you better and different. And that last piece is you. Why are you better suited to serve them? Now, I think for those of you, many folks may have seen this before. We'll talk about really how do you practically apply it? But the key here is most people actually start doing this backwards, right? You start building credibility by talking about yourself and then expect that to get the customer to open up while they're meanwhile waiting for you to give them product and price or even run a demo in that first interaction, right? So your opportunity to drive value when you start doing this backwards is really, really small. The other thing that we see happen all the time is you make a connection, you understand the problem, then you jump right to the solution. You lose the opportunity to actually unpack the strategy and the urgency and actually make sure that you've got line on a better suited buying coalition on a better quality deal. So we're going to talk about a little bit of the details of how you dig into that. All right. Again, we'll have to pull up probably at the end to see what the key questions are, but let's break this down in the last 10 minutes we have, okay? So again, there's gonna be a lot of detail. We can share more of this later, but really thinking about, this is a two-way dialogue. And so this research around these 6 stages, as I mentioned, has been built on for years, right? But the key thing is I think it plants the wrong perception that this is a one-way script or a one-way dialogue. Now, certainly marketing, for the marketing folks or the CROs, you want to think about how do I build content that fits this model. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about a conversation, it's got to be practical, it's got to be realistic, and it's got to be a two-way dialogue. So going into each of your first sales interactions, your discovery meetings, you want to think about what is my objective as a salesperson, and then ultimately, what's the information, what's the reactions that I want to get? And you want to keep that mapped in mind, and you're going to want to actually chunk the information, not conflate it all into one sort of frenetic mess, right? So when you start out, how do you make a connection? The easiest way to do this is to be incredibly human and professional at the same time. These days, that's even more important, but there is hygiene, right? Like, are you setting a right agenda? Are you aligning on expectations early? Are you doing the right kind of introductions? But are you doing it in a way that actually leads to why you're there and how you're best set up to solve for the problems they face? The next thing you want to do is actually, instead of asking them a bunch of questions about what keeps them up at night, you actually want to be able to bring in stories based on a hypothesis that you've done in your research or that your team has helped you create for this different customer profile to say, hey, customers we know, like you, are typically trying to achieve this, and they're typically doing these things to get there, right? And so this is your opportunity to also share trends that you might know in the industry. And so what you want to do is you want to get, at this point, the customer excited to show that, hey, this person really gets my world. They get what I'm going through. They're talking about me. They're not talking about themselves. Now, the diagnosis, you want to have a set of questions you're prepared for. You're not going to ask a million questions, but you're going to start really trying to find out what is the journey that they're on and make sure that it's a strategic journey, not the specific use case that's been brought to you. What is the view of the status quo? So what are they doing right now about the issues you might have suggested for them? And then what's the gap, right? And those who are fans of gap selling and other models, this is really important because you're aiming at the gap because you're the partner that's going to get them across that gap, right? And so this is your opportunity when you actually share with them, this is how other customers are seeing it, to dig in to see how big a gap do they view it is, what do they view as their key challenges, what are they actually doing right now? So you know about the current, is it something they're solving for on their own? What stage are they in their buying journey? Other key qualifiers that are specific to your business. So this is really important. And by the way, you can prepare your sales team with a lot of great hypotheses and ideas with a playbook to help them actually go in and put that conversation on some really refined guardrails. Now, step 2, this is where you're dialing up a little bit, the expectation, which is you're going to now do something different. You're not just telling them things they know. You're going to share that you actually have deep experience in current actions and reactions that are actually going to help them look at you as a partner that they want to grab out and reach your hand from now on to say, hey, how do I actually be most successful at this journey and not just shortcut my way to the next few months? And so this is your opportunity to share about issues and outcomes that they may not have heard of. This is an opportunity to say, hey, listen, like the current actions most people are taking, it's counterintuitive, but some of those actions are actually leading to the opposite result. And so this is where you really want to think about the bad habits you've seen your customers taking and making and dial these up to say, hey, is this the world you're living in? We can see around the corner. Maybe you haven't been there yet because this is the first time you've gone down this path. You need to do this respectfully, and you need to do it in a way that is obviously a back and forth where you're asking them questions to help them see if they're really thinking about and open to a new idea, or if they're just, in RFP mode and they already basically have agreement on everything that they need and they're just waiting for you and pushing you for product and price, which, by the way, this is how you start really doing your qualification, or is this a good fit with you? If they don't agree with any of the problems, if they don't agree with any of the challenges, if they're seeing things completely differently, hey, great, you might want to ask them what their different view of the world is. But if it's not aligned to how you're set up to serve, then chances are you might want to cut bait on that opportunity or try to redirect them or come back at another time. So this is something where you should be talking to your product teams, talking to your peers across the business, or what are the problem statements, what are the mistakes our customers are making, so that we can package these up and actually test these ideas with them so that they actually open their mind a little bit to say, whoa, you know what, maybe I don't have this all figured out, and you seem to have a different way of looking at the world that's intriguing. Now, don't skip ahead, right? Once you get them admitting to a problem, that there's a challenge that they haven't quite figured out, now's your opportunity to really dig in and start asking those secondary questions around how is that a problem? How is that problem actually affecting the business? How are you tracking and measuring that problem? And get them to really start talking and opening up about, yeah, you know what? It isn't just this kind of user case that we brought to you. There's some really strategic things happening in the business. This is a key project because it's aligned to that outcome. Now you really want to start digging into the bigger picture and the bigger picture challenges that this partnership might solve for. This business value, this is the beginning of what we call a cost of inaction case. So you're trying to drive urgency around what happens if you do nothing. And then you're trying to figure out also what's the flip side of that. We'll talk about the ROI later, but right here, it's the cost of the problem. The next piece, which we see frequently skipped over in business cases, is stakeholder impact. This is the emotional side of the equation. So you've got to think about not just how do we tell stories about how this affects other businesses, because you want to have those. Well, you want them to talk about, like, what's the worst thing that happens when this problem really rears its head, right? You want them to talk about, oh, you know what? It's not just affecting me, it's affecting my team. It's not just affecting my team, it's affecting my customers. And by the way, when it affects my customers, then it affects churn. And then that dials up to the CEO, CFO level challenge, right? So you really want to create a snowball effect here. And that leads to, I think, the combination of the rational emotional. We've shown some buyers may actually have a much more a visceral reaction to the emotional case than just the rational case, right? So having both means you're going to be able to stretch further in driving urgency. All right. Now we get to the point where you get to talk about yourself, but don't use your name, right? So you want the customer now to really start describing for you, hey, this is what an ideal solution would actually look like to the problem that we just really talked about. You're probably seeing now that the needs and requirements should have shifted a little bit from when you started the dialogue, because they probably started in most cases these days with what can I do that's the lowest risk and lowest cost. Now they probably should be thinking of, geez, I don't want to lose my job for bringing in a solution that's not actually going to solve for the problem. Maybe we should think about moving away from shortcuts to a holistic solution. And for those of you moving product to platform, a lot of times that means, oh, wow, there's a reason that we should have hardware, software, and services, or we should have, this multiple use case platform with end-to-end solution for us. Like, this is where you're testing. Have you got there along the journey or not? And this is where you're qualifying when they describe the solution. Is it similar to how you're set up? Because at this point, if they're not describing it the way you're set up to serve, again, you're qualifying. This may not be high quality business, and you either want to deal with them quickly. This may be a sort of a cheap transactional opportunity or not. And reaching the conclusion right as we come up on 20 minutes is the part you should do great now, right? This is where you actually can prove. You've got them led into your hands. You can actually prove, hey, we've spent the last 10 years, 20 years, maybe only been in business 2 years, but this is all we've been doing all our lives, is working up to getting a solution that actually fits that need. It's all we care about. And by the way, we've got case studies, we've got metrics to prove it. And so now's my opportunity to talk about our difference and our differentiation. And ideally, it should look exactly like the solution that they've described if you've done this really well. Now, let's not stop there, though. The key here is, in this two-way dialogue, it's not just about proving anything about yourself. It's now re-qualifying the opportunity. And so when we train teams or look at teams, there's an idea of putting a bow on it, right? So you're playing back to them, like, from what I understand, this is what you're trying to achieve. This is what that path looks like. This is who's involved. This is why it's important. And here's the things you're thinking about doing to get there. Now, could I confirm, based on what we talked about, this, and this, would that actually fit the needs and requirements that you believe could actually solve that problem you talked about and potentially set us up for a great partnership? If they say yes, then you have a next meeting that actually has a purpose. You're not just asking for another meeting to share more information and you're clogging up your pipeline, right? So this is an opportunity to actually consolidate and make sure that it's a good fit, and then having them. So the things you're looking for here is that they're actually asking you, how soon can we meet, right? Who are the other people that care about this? How can we bring them to the table? And so if you don't believe you're doing a good job multi-threading, if you've done this right at this point, you can actually ask those other people into the next meeting, who cares about this issue? Who's responsible? Who would get value out of having a continued discussion around this? So that's, at the end of the day, how you actually elevate the conversation as well, is the way we think about it, and run a kick-ass, if I can say it, discovery meeting. There's a lot in here. You got to break it down and make it practical for yourselves. One thing I'll leave you with is, typically with our customers, you want a checklist around insight that makes this simple, that you can share around the organization and talk about between marketing and sales. And then typically what you want is a discovery meeting guide, right? So whether you're building this into Gong or some other infrastructure you have, but most importantly, you got managers coaching to these behaviors. And so you want to build this into, and we customize this for our clients, but how do you actually look at the discipline of running the meeting and the different steps and have a good way of coaching around this when you do your call reviews, peer-to-peer coaching and self-coaching, right? And so there's a number of different pieces there. So I'll pull up for questions in a second. We've only gone 2 minutes over. But here's just a quick view as a leave behind. So mastering discovery, as you see the second thing, that's one of the things that we work a lot on with our customers, but ultimately we have a model called Insight to Value that works on all these different steps to bringing insight, connecting the business case, and then actually putting that into a customer value roadmap to work with your customer to a high quality deal, and then actually value realization on implementation. And so I'll pull up now for questions if anyone wants to stay for a couple minutes. But hey, it's been a lot of fun. Hopefully you got a lot of takeaways from that. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast. And we're Insight Revenue, and we're all about the science of growth. So I'll stick around for a few more minutes for any questions. Otherwise, thanks for joining. Thanks, everyone.